Welcome to the Funeral Channel Network podcast, everyone. This is our deep dive for the day, and I want to talk to you about a really strange thing regarding the human experience.
Oh, yeah. There are a few of those.
Right. But specifically, how some of the most profound, life-altering moments we go through are just accompanied by this completely unexpected and overwhelming crash course in vocabulary.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a new language.
It really is. Think about it. You're sitting in a room and, the air conditioning is humming just a little too loudly in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And the upholstery on the chair you're in is slightly too formal. And you have just experienced a profound loss.
Yeah.
So your cognitive load is already at its absolute maximum. You're just running on pure adrenaline and, maybe a couple of hours of terrible sleep.
If you're lucky.
Right, if you're lucky. So you walk into that funeral director's office and you're expecting this very simple binary choice, like a clear fork in the road. Exactly. You think to yourself, well, it's either a traditional casket burial or it's cremation. It feels clean. It feels, categorical.
Sure.
But then the funeral director leans forward and they slide this glossy, heavy stock brochure across the mahogany desk. And suddenly you are staring at a word that looks like it belongs in a Victorian novel.
Yeah.
An Inurnment.
It's a completely jarring moment for almost everyone who sits in that chair.
Yeah.
I mean, you walk in thinking you're just there to make a rapid logistical decision about a body.
Right.
And suddenly you're being asked to learn an entirely new dialect. It's really this language of transition. A language of finality. And it's thrust upon you at the exact moment when your brain is just least equipped to process nuance.
Because you're in shock.
Exactly. We want things to be straightforward when we're grieving. We crave absolute simplicity because, well, complex thought requires energy we just simply do not have right then.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
But the landscape of end-of-life planning is rarely just a straight paved road. It's highly nuanced, it's intricately structured, and the terminology can feel archaic precisely because it deals with concepts that are as old as humanity itself.
And just when you think you understand what cremation means, this new word enters the chat, It changes the entire trajectory of the conversation.
It really does.
It forces you to rethink what the final step actually looks like. So to help you navigate this, we have pulled together a massive stack of industry guides, legal frameworks, and sociological research on the final placement of cremated remains.
There is a lot of material to go through.
There is. And our mission in this deep dive is to basically decode the practical layers, the surprisingly dense legal layers, and most importantly, I think, the profound emotional layers of inurnment.
Right.
We're going to look at everything from the physical architecture where we place our loved ones to the ancient cultural tapestries that dictate how we do it, right down to the modern technological trends that are entirely redefining what it even means to be remembered.
Yeah, and what we're really talking about today isn't just funeral logistics.
No.
We aren't just discussing the dimensions of a bronze container here. We're talking about the fundamental human need for permanence in an ever-changing world.
Wow, yeah.
We're looking at how society constructs physical and emotional anchors to hold on to when everything else just feels like it's slipping away from us.
That's a great way to put it.
And taking the time to understand this architecture now, while the stakes are low and your mind is clear, it's an act of extreme foresight. It removes the mystery and the panic from a process that literally every single one of us will eventually face.
Okay, let's unpack this because to truly grasp the weight of this topic, we first have to strip away the confusion and look at the absolute basic mechanics.
Let's do it.
Before we can talk about where things go, we have to define exactly what we are doing. So the word inurnment is rooted quite literally in the word urn, right? The physical container used to hold cremated remains.
Right.
So inurnment specifically means the act of placing that urn into a final, permanent, or at least semi-permanent resting location. It is basically the cremated equivalent of burying a casket.
Yeah, and that's an important distinction because when people hear the word cremation, their minds often immediately jump to a very cinematic image.
Oh, totally. Like standing on a beach.
Right. They picture a family standing on a windy cliffside or, on the deck of a boat, just scattering ashes into the ocean.
Like in the movies.
Exactly like the movies.
Yeah.
But scattering is fundamentally about dispersal. It's about returning the elements to the vastness of nature, which, certainly has its own poetry, but it lacks a fixed geographical coordinate.
Right, there's no address.
Exactly. Inurnment is the exact opposite. It's about establishing a specific tangible point on a map. It provides a fixed location where you can physically travel, park your car, walk up to a specific spot, and just remember a specific life.
So to understand how we arrive at that fixed location, the guides kind of walk us through this very specific chronological progression. It's a journey of transformation.
Mm-hmm.
First, you have the cremation itself, the process of reducing the human body to fine particles. From there, those remains are placed into a temporary container, which is usually this very utilitarian plastic or cardboard box.
Very basic.
Yeah. Then the family receives that temporary container, and eventually those remains are transferred into a chosen permanent urn. And only after all of that transformation and transfer does the actual inurnment take place.
What's crucial here is that each of those steps represents a distinct psychological phase for the grieving mind.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, the cremation is the physical, biological transformation. But that temporary container, that represents the state of emotional limbo.
Oh, yeah.
It's this transitional period where the family is literally holding the remains, sometimes keeping them in a closet or on a desk, for weeks, while they grapple with the final destination.
I've definitely known people who kept the box in a closet because they didn't know what to do yet.
It's incredibly common. And then, selecting the chosen urn is the personalization of the vessel.
Okay.
You're basically imbuing an object with the identity of the lost loved one.
Right.
And finally, the inurnment is the resolution. It's the placement. The funeral industry has developed this distinct language to purposefully separate the act of transformation from the act of placement.
I see. Let's think about this through an analogy. The cremation process feels a bit like packing up a house when you're moving.
Okay, I like that.
You know, you're condensing this sprawling lifetime into concentrated, manageable boxes. And inurnment feels like finally arriving at the new house, walking through the front door and unpacking. You're placing the person in their new permanent context.
Yes.
But honestly, let me push back a little here. Is the word inurnment really fundamentally different from burial? Because if you're putting a sealed container into a hole in the ground, that is a burial.
Yeah.
Why do we need a $50 Victorian-sounding word for it? It feels a little like, I don't know, clever industry jargon designed to categorize and sell a different, maybe more specialized set of services.
I completely understand why it feels that way. And logistically speaking, yes, if you place an urn in the soil, you are burying it.
Right.
But humans are creatures of profound ritual. We rely heavily on specialized language to elevate an action from the mundane to the sacred.
Oh, okay.
If a funeral director simply said, we're going to put the plastic container in a hole, it completely strips the dignity from the moment.
It sounds like planting a shrub.
Exactly. It reduces a really profound emotional transition to a purely mechanical landscaping task.
Wow, yeah, when you put it like that.
By utilizing a specific formal term like inurnment, society acknowledges that this is a specialized structured ritual. It differentiates the handling of cremated remains, which have already been radically transformed by fire, from the handling of an intact physical body in a casket.
Right, it's a completely different tactile experience.
Exactly. The language itself creates a psychological boundary around the event. It signals to your brain that something significant, something final and culturally important is occurring. You aren't just conducting a real estate transaction with the cemetery.
No.
You're officially establishing a legacy. The vocabulary builds the necessary reverence.
The vocabulary builds the reverence. I love that. I see how that functions as a psychological tool.
Yeah.
So now that we've defined the act of placement and we understand the linguistic weight behind it, we have to look at the geographical canvas where this actually happens.
The physical space.
Right. The architecture of final rest is incredibly varied, and the physical environment you choose completely dictates the emotional experience of the people left behind to visit.
The environment completely frames the memory. And the documentation we have outlines 4 primary architectural options. They represent a wide spectrum of visibility, accessibility, and community integration.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first, and perhaps the one most heavily associated with the specific term inurnment, is the columbarium niche.
Right. A columbarium is basically a structure specifically designed to store urns. It's made up of dozens, sometimes hundreds, of small individual compartments called niches.
Mm-hmm.
You can find them indoors, perhaps lining the walls inside a church or a specialized mausoleum building, or they can be outdoors, built into stone walls in a memorial garden. They usually feature personalized plaques, brass nameplates, or engravings on the front.
Yeah, they're very uniform but personalized.
To me, a columbarium feels almost like an apartment complex for legacies. You have all these individual lives, individual stories, housed in incredibly close proximity to one another, just stacked in neat, orderly rows.
What's fascinating here is the sheer sense of communal history that a columbarium fosters. When you visit a niche to see your loved one, you're invariably walking past walls of other lives.
You can't avoid it.
No, you're seeing the names, the birth years, the small engraved symbols of countless other families. It creates a collective atmosphere.
Yeah.
You're placing your loved one into a shared physical tapestry of a community's history. The echo of footsteps in an indoor columbarium, the visual weight of hundreds of brass plaques. It's a very different psychological experience than standing completely alone in a sprawling open field.
It makes you feel less alone, maybe.
Exactly. You realize your grief is just one small part of a massive human continuum.
But not everyone wants that communal echo. Some
Right.
people need dirt. They need the earth. Which brings us to the second option, ground burial of an urn.
Right.
This is where inurnment runs parallel to traditional casket practices. You can bury an urn in a standard family cemetery plot, or sometimes cemeteries have specialized smaller sections specifically dedicated to cremated remains.
Yes, cremation gardens are very popular.
But what is truly fascinating is that you can often place an urn within an existing grave, directly alongside or on top of an already buried casket. Ground burial feels more like buying the land and rooting the person back into the physical soil of the planet.
And placing an urn alongside an existing grave is a remarkably powerful way to maintain a sense of family unity across generations.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it allows spouses or parents and children to remain physically tethered in their final resting place, even if one generation chose a traditional burial and the next generation chose cremation.
Because you don't need a whole second plot.
Exactly. It bridges the gap between shifting societal preferences regarding bodily disposition. You don't have to separate the family simply because the physical format of the remains is different.
Then we have mausoleums or crypts. These are the grand above-ground structures. They provide absolute protection from environmental elements.
The really big stone buildings.
Yeah. Right. If you choose an indoor mausoleum, you have this elegant, temperature-controlled, structured setting where you can visit regardless of a blizzard or a thunderstorm. It's dry, it's quiet, and it's usually architecturally imposing, involving a lot of granite and marble.
Mausoleums appeal to a very specific, very deep human desire for absolute preservation. By elevating the remains above the earth and encasing them in heavy stone, there is a profound psychological comfort in feeling that the urn is safe.
Safe from nature.
Right. It's protected from the rain, the freezing snow, the insects, and just the general degradation of the soil. It is the ultimate human attempt to defy the natural elements. It projects a sense of unyielding permanence.
But then we pivot completely away from these structured, formal stone environments to the fourth option, private property inurnment.
Oh, yes.
This is the idea of bringing the urn home and burying it on your own land. On the surface, this sounds incredibly intimate and poetic, right?
It does.
Burying the urn under the old oak tree at the edge of the family farm, right where they used to sit and watch the sunset. But wait, what happens 50 years from now?
That is the big question.
Families move, financial situations change. What happens when the farm is inevitably sold and a commercial real estate developer buys the acreage, bulldozes that beautiful old oak tree, and paves over the site to build a strip mall?
It happens all the time.
The guides explicitly warn about this, mentioning the need to heavily consider local laws, the future ownership of the property, and long-term accessibility. It seems like a massive, almost reckless risk to take with something that is supposed to be permanent.
You're hitting on the exact tension that makes private property inurnment such a complex sociological issue. You are constantly weighing the immediate, profound comfort of keeping a loved one geographically close against the cold, hard, historical reality that human property ownership is inherently temporary. We love to think of our homes as our castles forever, but genealogically speaking, family estates rarely stay in the exact same bloodline for more than 2 or 3 generations. Eventually, the deed changes hands.
The bank gets involved, the property is subdivided, and the history is erased.
And when those new owners take possession, they have zero emotional connection to that specific spot of dirt under the oak tree. They don't know the story.
They just see a yard.
Exactly. And this vulnerability is exactly why formal cemeteries and columbariums were invented and why they hold such enduring appeal. Cemeteries are legally protected entities. They are strictly zoned and often established in perpetuity through complex civic trusts.
Oh, right.
When you choose a formal cemetery, you're essentially purchasing a legal insurance policy on your loved one's memory. You're relying on the rigid structures of the state to protect that geographical coordinate long after your family has moved across the country or your lineage has ended.
Wow.
Private property relies solely on the fragile hope that the future will respect the past, which, honestly, history proves is a very dangerous bet.
Yeah, you're trading the intimacy of your backyard for the ironclad security of civic zoning. So, we've explored the geographical choices, we know the physical locations. Now, let's explore how the urn actually gets there.
Let's do it.
Because the journey to the site reveals what is arguably the single greatest practical benefit of choosing cremation and inurnment over a traditional casket burial: the gift of time.
Yes, the logistics of time shift entirely when we're discussing inurnment. The biological ticking clock is completely removed from the equation.
Right, because a traditional burial is governed by the undeniable, urgent laws of biology and decomposition. It has to happen quickly, usually within a matter of 3 to 5 days.
It's extremely fast.
But with inurnment, there's no biological imperative forcing your hand. It can happen immediately after the cremation, sure, but it can happen 3 weeks later, or it can happen 12 months later. You can hold a ceremony while the sharp is fresh, or you can delay it entirely until the family is ready.
And this delay offers a profound psychological relief for a grieving family. When a sudden death occurs, the family is instantly thrust into a chaotic whirlwind of shock, grief, and frantic decision-making.
It's overwhelming.
Having to plan a perfect, meaningful tribute, coordinate travel for 50 people, write a eulogy, and select a casket all within a 72-hour window is incredibly traumatic.
It's like you don't even have time to process the loss.
You don't. By removing the biological urgency, the cremation process grants the family the grace of a pause. They can breathe. They can wait for a distant relative to finish a military deployment. They can wait for the harsh winter snows to melt so they can hold a beautiful outdoor ceremony in the spring sun. They can plan with intention rather than panic.
So, what does this all mean? To use an analogy, a traditional burial feels like a live, unscripted television broadcast.
That's good.
You know, the cameras are rolling, the unexpected happens, someone is crying too hard to speak, the weather is terrible, and you just have to react in real time. You just push through and do the best you can under the crushing pressure.
Yeah.
But an inurnment is like a carefully edited documentary. You have the luxury of sitting in the editing room. You can curate the music. You can help people refine their eulogies over weeks. You can select the perfect day, and you wait for the exact right moment to release the final product. You have the time to get the tribute exactly right.
And because you have that time in the metaphorical editing room, the ceremony itself can be incredibly diverse and tailored.
Right.
The structure of an inurnment ceremony, whether it's highly religious, broadly spiritual, or entirely secular, usually follows a distinct narrative arc.
What does that look like?
It generally involves opening words to ground the attendees, the actual physical placement of the heavy urn into the niche or the earth, deliberate readings, dedicated moments of absolute silence to force reflection, and closing remarks to signal the end of the transition.
And to help guide that narrative arc, the industry relies heavily on tangible resources, specifically printed materials. The guides point to tools like the funeral program site, where families use to design and print the physical order of service, comprehensive biographical information, curated photo collages, and lasting keepsakes. I find it endlessly fascinating that in a process that is entirely about reducing a human physical body to absolute dust, we place such a massive, frantic emphasis on generating brand new physical objects, like heavy, glossy, printed programs, to hand out to every single person at the ceremony.
It is a striking paradox, but it speaks directly to the mechanics of how the human brain processes profound loss.
How so?
When the physical body of the deceased is suddenly no longer present in the three-dimensional way we're accustomed to, our brains frantically search the environment for a substitute physical anchor.
Oh.
We are tactile creatures. We need something to hold. A beautifully printed program, especially one customized with thick paper and high-resolution photos from a platform like the funeral program site, ceases to be just a piece of paper. It becomes a surrogate physical presence.
It holds the face and the dates.
Exactly. It holds the narrative. During the quiet moments of the ceremony, as the urn is being lowered or placed into the wall, if you look around, the attendees are white-knuckling those programs in their hands.
I've totally done that.
Right. It gives them a physical tether to the person. when the biological reality of the person is gone. It serves as a navigational guide in the chaotic emotional moment, but it immediately transitions into a permanent physical artifact of the closure.
The paper literally becomes the anchor when the body disappears. That is so powerful. And speaking of anchors, the immense flexibility of this entire ceremony naturally bends to fit the specific cultural and religious beliefs of the family. The theological frameworks surrounding human remains are incredibly deep, and they dictate very strict rules about this concept of inurnment. It is absolutely not a one-size-fits-all approach.
No, not at all. The way different cultures view the permanence and the sanctity of ashes reveals their deepest beliefs about the nature of the soul and the mechanics of the afterlife.
Starting with Christianity broadly, many denominations today have a general, practical acceptance of cremation and inurnment. It's often accompanied by traditional prayers and blessings, and the urn is typically placed in consecrated ground.
Right.
But Catholicism has a very distinct, very rigid stance. The Catholic Church permits cremation, but it strongly prefers, and in many diocesan interpretations, strictly mandates inurnment in a sacred, dedicated location. It explicitly forbids the scattering of ashes, emphasizing a deep, unyielding respect for the physical remains.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that the Catholic perspective is not just about arbitrary rules. It's deeply rooted in their foundational theology of the physical body and the literal resurrection.
But wait, why draw such a hard, unyielding line against scattering ashes in, say, a beautiful ancient redwood forest or over the deep ocean? Because doesn't nature itself feel profoundly sacred to most people? I think a huge portion of the population today would argue that returning your elements to the earth in a sprawling forest is the ultimate, most poetic act of reverence. Why the strict insistence on a concrete columbarium or a fenced-in cemetery plot?
From a modern, secular, or perhaps spiritual but not religious viewpoint, scattering in the vastness of nature feels deeply beautiful. It feels like returning to the source.
Yeah, exactly.
From the theological reasoning driving the Catholic mandate, it's about the structural integrity of the individual and the cohesive community of the faithful. In Catholic tradition, the physical body was the temple of the Holy Spirit.
Right.
Even in its reduced, cremated state, the ash is viewed with the exact same reverence as an intact corpse. Scattering the ashes to the winds is seen as a deliberate dispersal, an intentional diminishment of that individual's integrity.
Oh, I hadn't thought about it like that.
Furthermore, Catholicism is a highly communal religion. Inurnment in a sacred designated location provides a specific, wholly geographical coordinate for the entire community, not just the immediate family, but the whole parish, to mourn, to pray, and to remember.
So it's about the group, too.
Yes, it keeps the deceased individual integrated within the physical, geographical community of the church, rather than having them dispersed and lost into the anonymous void of nature.
It's about maintaining the flock, even in death. That underlying logic makes perfect sense. Now, moving to Eastern traditions, Buddhist and Hindu practices traditionally favor scattering in sacred rivers, the Ganges being the most famous and spiritually potent example.
Right.
But the research notes something fascinating. Inurnment is rapidly growing as a modern, practical adaptation within these ancient traditions.
This is a prime example of global migration forcing ancient religious mechanics to adapt to modern civic realities. When families from Eastern traditions migrate to Western countries, they may not have geographical access to a historically sacred river.
That makes sense.
More importantly, Western environmental regulations and municipal laws usually strictly prohibit the large-scale scattering of human remains in public waterways or local rivers due to water quality concerns.
Oh, yeah. You can't just drop ashes off a bridge in most cities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a fascinating compromise. Inurnment, perhaps in a columbarium niche that's carefully chosen for its specific directional facing, or an urn adorned with traditional Hindu or Buddhist iconography, becomes a necessary bridge between ancient spiritual requirements and strict modern zoning laws.
And finally, we have secular approaches. Without ancient religious rites dictating the steps, these ceremonies are built entirely around personal storytelling, psychological reflection, and celebrating the specific details of the life lived. The physical inurnment serves as a symbolic narrative conclusion to the event rather than a spiritual transition to an afterlife. It really proves that no matter the belief system, the human psychological need for a definitive, concluding physical act remains universal.
The human mind demands a period at the end of the sentence. The need to state clearly and physically, this is the end of the journey and this is where they will remain, completely transcends religious affiliation. It's a fundamental psychological mechanism for processing finality.
But, as we all know, while religion might dictate the spiritual rules, the government absolutely dictates the physical ones.
Oh, yes, they do.
Beneath the poetry of memory and the theology of the soul, there is a suffocating mountain of paperwork. Let's dig into the surprisingly bureaucratic side of final rest and the physical receptacles we're legally required to use.
Death is an incredibly heavily regulated civic event, and inurnment is wrapped in layers of municipal and state law. The sudden collision of deep, paralyzing emotional grief with cold bureaucratic paperwork is one of the most jarring and exhausting experiences a family will endure.
You don't just walk into a cemetery with an urn under your arm.
No, absolutely not.
You need a stack of documentation. You need certified death certificates, which alone can take days to secure. You need signed cremation authorizations, proving you have the legal right to alter the body. You need cemetery or columbarium agreements, which read like dense commercial real estate leases.
It's a lot of fine print.
And you have to navigate zoning laws if you are even considering private property, just to ensure you aren't burying remains too close to a municipal water table. And even in a private cemetery, there are strict HOA-style rules about exactly what kinds of markers, fonts, or bronze plaques are permitted.
It can be a nightmare to navigate alone.
This is where funeral professionals become absolute lifesavers. You aren't just hiring someone to handle the physical urn, you are hiring a legal guide to hack through the red tape.
Without a funeral director acting as a Sherpa, a grieving, sleep-deprived family could easily inadvertently violate a local health ordinance or fail to file the proper chain of custody authorization, completely legally paralyzing the entire process for weeks.
Wow, just because of one missed signature.
Exactly. The bureaucracy is entirely devoid of empathy. It exists solely to ensure public health and legal clarity. The funeral professional acts as the necessary, rational buffer between the shattered mourning family and the rigid, unfeeling machinery of the state.
And part of navigating that physical machinery involves choosing the actual urn. The industry categorizes them into three main functions.
Okay.
First, decorative urns, which are designed purely for aesthetic display, perhaps behind glass in an indoor columbarium niche or temporarily on a mantle at home. Second, burial urns, which are engineered to be highly durable, made of stone or thick metal, to withstand the crushing physical pressure of the earth and the moisture of the ground.
Right, they have to be tough.
And third, biodegradable urns, which are designed to be eco-friendly and break down over time.
The physical engineering of the urn really must match its final environmental destination. You cannot place a fragile, blown glass decorative urn into the dirt because the weight of the settling earth will immediately crush it. You need a specialized burial vault or an urn specifically reinforced for ground pressure.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Wait, hold on. I need to stop on biodegradable urns for a second.
Sure.
If the urn is biodegradable and it's designed to completely dissolve and break down into the surrounding dirt, haven't we just defeated the entire definition of inurnment?
How so?
Well, you just said in Section 1 that the whole point of this word was to establish a permanent container in a fixed location as opposed to scattering. Doesn't a dissolving cardboard or salt box completely negate the idea of a permanent resting place?
That is the exact contradiction that the modern funeral industry is currently wrestling with.
Right.
You are absolutely right. Traditional inurnment was about preserving the physical remains inside a durable, unchanging container forever.
Right.
But what we're seeing with the massive rise in popularity of biodegradable urns is a fundamental evolution of what the word permanence actually means to a modern family.
How does a dissolving box equal permanence? I don't get it.
The definition is shifting from the permanence of the physical object to the permanence of the geographical memory. When you use a biodegradable urn in a recognized, legally protected cemetery or a dedicated natural burial ground, the physical box will indeed dissolve. The ashes will eventually merge entirely with the soil, essentially becoming a delayed form of scattering.
So the container is gone.
In that material sense, the container is gone.
Mm.
However, the exact GPS coordinate, the specific plot of land, the marker placed above it, that remains permanent. You are returning the elements to the earth, but you're doing it in a highly structured, legally recorded, and civically protected way.
So it's still mapped.
Exactly. So the permanence is no longer about defying nature with thick bronze and concrete. It's about securing a permanent, untouchable space within nature where the family can always return. The memory, the legal right to visit, and the location are permanent, even if the vessel is ephemeral.
That completely reframes the concept. The location is the legacy, not the box itself. And of course, before that box goes into the ground or onto the shelf, families crave personalization. Engravings, laser-etched photos, specific religious symbols, or custom artwork on the urn itself. It is the absolute final opportunity to imprint the individual's unique identity onto the physical world before they are tucked away.
And that desperate human desire to imprint identity is driving a massive, sweeping technological shift in how we handle inurnment today. We are currently witnessing the real-time marriage of ancient, stone-based grief rituals with cutting-edge digital technology.
The integration of digital technology into cemeteries is wild to think about. We're seeing inurnment sites, whether it's a brass niche plaque or a traditional granite gravestone, frequently incorporating QR codes or embedded NFC chips.
It's becoming so common.
Visitors can literally walk up to the resting place, pull out their smartphone, scan the code etched into the stone, and instantly be transported to a dedicated digital memorial page featuring high-definition videos, sprawling photo galleries, and written tributes from people all over the world.
It adds a profound, immersive layer of interaction that has literally never existed in the entire history of human memorialization. For thousands of years, a grave was just a name and two dates. Now it's a multimedia portal.
It's like turning a quiet, static, slightly depressing cemetery into an interactive museum of human lives. You aren't just reading a name and doing the math on how old they were when they died.
Right.
You're standing on the grass holding your phone and watching them blow out birthday candles on their 50th birthday, or listening to a voice note of their laugh right there at the gravesite.
It's incredible.
But wait, we all know how fast technology decays. We all have bookmarks on our browsers from 5 years ago that lead to dead web pages today. What happens when the startup hosting that digital memorial goes bankrupt in 15 years?
Yeah.
Or what if the domain registration simply expires because the family members who set it up and paid the annual fee have also passed away? Is there honestly anything sadder or more dystopian than scanning your great-grandfather's tombstone and getting a blank white 404-page not found error?
It's a very real concern.
It feels incredibly fragile to tie a legacy to a server farm.
This raises an important question, right? The fragility of a 404 error is the central anxiety occurring right now at the intersection of technology and memorialization. You are highlighting the extreme vulnerability of digital memory versus the undeniable brute force durability of carved stone.
Yeah.
When you carve a name deep into a piece of granite, you are ensuring that it will be readable for centuries, barring absolute geological destruction. Granite does not require a software update. Granite does not care if the hosting bill was paid this month.
Granite doesn't crash when the wifey goes out.
Exactly. But granite is also entirely silent. It cannot laugh. It cannot show you the exact way a person's eyes crinkled when they smiled at their child. The human desire to be remembered perfectly, in full color and motion, is so incredibly strong that families are actively willing to risk the eventual 404 error for the chance to provide a rich multimedia experience for the visitors who are alive today.
They want that connection now.
And this is precisely why families are utilizing a dual approach. They aren't abandoning the physical world for the digital one. They are still heavily investing in physical keepsakes, memorial bookmarks, prayer cards, and those comprehensive, beautifully bound printed programs from places like the funeral program site.
Ah, hedging their bets.
They're hedging their bets against the digital decay. They use the QR code for the immersive, loud experience now, but they rely on the physical, printed paper and the carved stone as the ultimate fail-safe anchor that will survive when the servers inevitably go dark.
They are building a digital ghost, but chaining it to a physical anchor. I love that. The research provides a really helpful matrix to help families navigate the emotional weight of all these choices. It forces you to compare the 4 main avenues of disposition.
Right, the options.
You have inurnment, which provides permanent fixed location closure. You have scattering, which is non-permanent, beautiful dispersal. You have keeping the urn at home, which provides maximum immediate comfort and flexibility, but can delay ultimate closure. And finally, memorial jewelry, which is highly symbolic, allowing you to carry a tiny microscopic portion of ashes with you daily.
That matrix is vital because it forces families to look past the immediate shock of the death and confront the long-term, decades-long emotional impact of their choice.
Right.
For example, keeping the urn at home on the living room mantel feels deeply comforting in the raw, immediate aftermath of a death. You feel that they're still there watching TV with you.
It's comforting.
But psychologically, over the span of 5 or 10 years, it can make the grief inescapable. Your home is supposed to be your sanctuary, a place to recharge. But if the physical remains are permanently present in your living space, the visual cue of your profound loss is constant. You can never truly put it away.
That sounds exhausting.
Inurnment provides a crucial, healthy psychological boundary. It creates a designated separate place to visit for anniversaries and holidays. You can drive there, be fully and intensely present in your grief, cry, leave flowers, and then crucially, you can get back in your car and leave.
You literally drive away from it.
You physically walk away from the gravesite or the columbarium and return to the land of the living. It helps compartmentalize the mourning process and aids the brain in finally accepting the finality of the loss.
The ability to visit your grief rather than being forced to live inside of it every single day, that completely changes the perspective on why these massive stone structures and manicured lawns even exist. They are boundaries for the living just as much as they are resting places for the dead.
Absolutely.
As we look to synthesize this incredible journey through the practical and emotional architecture of final rest, I think the absolute biggest takeaway is that inurnment is infinitely more than just putting ashes in a box and walking away.
It's a whole system.
It is a highly structured, legally documented, and deeply culturally rich ritual. It's a process that gives grieving families the immense necessary flexibility of time while simultaneously providing the profound psychological comfort of a permanent physical anchor in a chaotic world.
It is the physical architecture of human memory.
Yeah.
And understanding these options now, while you're calm, sitting in traffic or cooking dinner, and not under the crushing duress of immediate grief, is one of the greatest acts of love you can offer your family.
Truly.
By understanding the functional, legal, and emotional differences between a columbarium niche, a ground burial, scattering, and digital memorialization, you are taking absolute control of your own legacy. You're doing the hard work so they don't have to. You're taking the burden of guesswork, debate, and panic off the shoulders of the people you leave behind.
You are leaving them a clear map instead of a devastating puzzle. We have gone from the archaic Victorian terminology of the funeral parlor all the way to the cutting edge of digital grief and QR codes. And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
Something that builds on everything we have discussed today about the collision of permanence and technology. As we continue to rapidly blend the concepts of biodegradable urns that literally melt into the forest floor, with high-tech NFC chips that link to digital clouds floating on servers halfway across the world, we are fundamentally and permanently changing what a final resting place actually is.
We really are.
So think about this. In 100 years, when your great-grandchildren want to know who you were, will a cemetery just be a quiet, static park of weathered, silent stone monuments? Or will it be a fully interactive, immersive digital library of humanity, humming with the downloaded memories, laughs, and voices of millions? Thank you for joining us on this Neck Dive.
Take